The stone was always cold. It leached the heat from your knees until you couldn't feel them anymore. That was the first lesson they taught us. Pain isn't an enemy to be avoided. Comfort is. I can still smell the ozone. It hangs in the air like a storm that never breaks, sharp and metallic. People ask what it takes to become a weapon of the Adepta Sororitas. They think it is about strength or skill or genetic perfection. It isn't. It is about what you are willing to lose. To build the temple, you must first clear the ground. We were the ground. The Hall of Judgment was vast. The ceiling was lost in shadows, swallowed by the gloom of the Schola Progenium. We were small, just specks of dust in the Emperor's golden eye. Hundreds of us wards of the state orphans of martyrs. We knelt in perfect rows on the granite floor. The silence was heavy. It pressed down on your shoulders like a physical weight. You didn't dare breathe too loud. Breathing meant you were alive. And being alive was a sin we had to apologize for. The silence stayed. Then came the sound. The rhythmic click of boots on stone. The drill abbess. She walked between the rows of kneeling children, a predator stalking a herd of frightened livestock. She carried the rod. We called it the corrector. It hummed with a low, angry buzz of motive force. We didn't look at her. We stared at the floor. If you looked up, you were proud. If you were proud, you were flawed. And flaws were burned away. My knees ached. A dull, throbbing agony that traveled up my thighs. I was 10 years old. I wanted to shift my weight. Just a fraction of an inch. Just to let the blood flow back into my legs. But I didn't move. Movement was weakness. Weakness was heresy. I focused on the smell of the incense. It was cloying, masking the scent of unwashed bodies and old fear. I tried to be stone. Stone does not feel pain. The footsteps stopped. Right beside me. I saw the hem of her robes. They were pristine, white and red, not a speck of dust. My heart hammered against my ribs. It sounded like a drum of war in my own ears. I was terrified she could hear it. Fear is a failure of faith. I bit the inside of my cheek to ground myself. Ward Kalen, she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It was granite rubbing against granite. The third verse of the Litany of Retribution. I knew the words. I had recited them 1,000 times in the dark. I had whispered them while I scrubbed the floors. I had dreamed them while I starved in my cot. The alien is a disease. The mutant is a corruption. But in that light under her gaze, the words turned to ash in my mouth. My throat closed up. The air felt too thin to breathe. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out but a squeak, a pathetic sound, the sound of a child, not a warrior. Speak, she commanded. The word was a hammer blow. I tried again. The enemy, I stammered. My mind was a blank slate wiped clean by panic. The enemy does not... I couldn't remember if they slept or if they waited. The distinction mattered. Doctrine requires precision. Ambiguity is the playground of the warp. I looked up. A fatal mistake. I looked into her eyes. I expected anger. I saw nothing. Just a cold, clinical disappointment. Weakness, she whispered. The rod touched my shoulder. It didn't burn like fire. It froze like the void. The shock seized every muscle in my small body. My teeth slammed together. I tasted copper. My vision went white, fractured by sparks of blue light. I wanted to scream. My lungs filled with air to let out a cry of agony, but I choked it down. Screaming was for victims. I bit my tongue until it bled. I fell sideways, my body rigid, twitching on the cold floor. The stone caught me without mercy. The other children didn't move. They didn't look. They were statues, carved from fear and obedience. The hum of the rod receded. I lay there, gasping for air, smelling the singed fabric of my tunic. My shoulder throbbed with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. But the pain wasn't the worst part. The shame was. I had failed. Not just the abbess. I had failed him. He sat on the golden throne, suffering for humanity, and I couldn't even recite a verse. I was worthless. I was broken. The shame burned hotter than the electricity. "Get up," the abbess said. Pain is the Emperor's love. It cleanses the doubt. It reminds you that you are flesh, and flesh must be mastered. I dragged myself back to my knees. My limbs shook uncontrollably. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and stinging. I refused to let them fall. Tears were water. Water was for the weak. I swallowed the copper taste of blood. I forced my spine straight. I forced my eyes back to the floor. The smell of ozone was sharp now. It smelled like burnt hair and sterile air. It was the smell of correction. My shoulder screamed at me, but I welcomed it. The pain gave me something to focus on. It was real. It was a tether to reality. If I hurt, I was alive. If I was alive, I could serve. If I could serve, I could be redeemed. I recited the verse in my head, perfectly. Too late for the test. Just in time for the soul. The lesson continued. The abbess moved on down the line. Tap, tap, tap. Someone else would fail. Someone else would learn. I stared at the gray stone. I memorized the cracks in the floor where my head had hit. I made a promise then. Not to the abbess, not even to the Emperor, but to the fear inside me. I would kill it. I would hollow myself out until there was no room left for hesitation. I would fill the empty space with duty. We were taught that mercy is a crime. I was 10 years old when I finally understood why. Mercy lets the weak survive. Mercy tolerates the failure. And I was done being weak. The silence returned to the hall heavier than before. But I was different. The child was dying on that cold floor. The weapon was being forged. And the forge is always hot. Ophelia 7th is not a planet. It is an altar the size of a world. The air does not smell like nature. It is recycled through filters, blessed by saints, thousands of years dead. It tastes of old parchment candle wax and the dust of bones. Every breath feels like you are inhaling history. It sits heavy in your lungs. It demands reverence. We stood in the Hall of Heroes. The ceiling was so high that clouds formed near the vaulted arches. Statues of martyrs looked down on us from the shadows. They were 50 feet tall, carved from white marble that seemed to glow in the gloom. Their faces were serene. They were beautiful because they were dead. To be alive is to be unfinished. To be alive is to be full of doubt. To be dead is to be perfect. I looked up at the stone face of St. Catherine. She held a sword. She looked like she had never known fear. I wanted that. I wanted to be stone. The canoness stood at the far end of the aisle. She did not look human. She was a tower of black ceramic and gold trim. Her power armor hummed, a low, deep vibration that you felt in your teeth rather than heard. It was the sound of a caged beast waiting to be let out. We were still in our rags, the rough gray tunics of the shola. The fabric scratched my skin. It was the skin of a child. We were here to shed it. We were here to be skinned. One by one, names were called. The acoustic of the hall turned every name into a sentence. One by one, girls walked forward. They walked as Kaelin or Jana or Mara. They returned as something else. Or they did not return at all. The silence between the names was absolute. Hundreds of us breathing in unison. A single organism waiting for its heart to beat. Ward Kaelin. The voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a mountain. My turn. My legs moved automatically. Drill had bypassed thought. I walked the long obsidian path. The floor was polished to a mirror sheen. I could see my own reflection walking with me. A pale, frightened ghost in gray rags. I kept my eyes fixed on the aquila on the canoness's chest. Don't look at the reflection. Look at the goal. I reached the steps and knelt. The stone was cold, but I didn't flinch. My knees found the stone like a key finds a lock. I bowed my head. The canoness loomed over me. I could smell her. Not perfume. She smelled of gun oil, promethium, and cold iron. She smelled like war. "You come to us as clay," she said. Her voice was dry, like leaves scraping on pavement. "You leave as steel. Do you offer your life?" "Yes," I whispered. Louder. "Yes." "Do you offer your death?" "Yes." "Do you offer your hate?" I paused, just for a microsecond. Hate felt like a sin. But she waited. "Yes," I said. "My hate belongs to him." She touched my forehead. Her gauntlet was ceramite. It was freezing against my skin. "Then the clay is broken." Two sisters stepped forward from the shadows. They moved with silent, lethal grace. They took my gray tunic. They cut it away with ceremonial knives. It fell to the floor in ribbons. I stood naked before the statues. I felt no shame. Shame is for those who have something to hide. I had nothing left to hide. I was offering it all up. The meat, the bone, the blood. Take it. Take it all. They dressed me in white. The fabric was heavy, woven with ballistic threads. Then came the armor. It was not the power armor of the fully initiated. I was not worthy of the fusion generator yet. This was carapace armor. Rigid plates of plasteel and ceramite. They clamped it onto my chest. It clicked into place. The weight settled onto my shoulders like a physical burden. It was heavy. Much heavier than I expected. It pressed down on my ribs. It forced my spine straight. It restricted my breath. I gasped, trying to fill my lungs. The armor pushed back. Good, I thought. It holds me. I cannot break if I am held this tight. "Speak your name," the canoness commanded. I opened my mouth. I thought of the name my parents gave me. I thought of the girl who used to cry when it rained. I thought of the girl who liked the taste of sweetbread. I swallowed her. I pushed her down into the dark. "I am Novice Kalen," I said. My voice sounded different. The acoustics of the helmet. No, I wasn't wearing a helmet. It was the armor. It changed the way I resonated. I have no past. I have no family. I have only the Emperor. The canoness nodded. "Rise, Novice. Your body is his. Your soul is his. Your hatred is his." I stood up. The armor clanked softly. A sound of industry. A sound of violence. I turned to face the others. The sea of gray tunics looked at me. They looked at me with fear and envy. I felt a strange distance. They looked so small, so soft. Was I that soft a moment ago? It seemed impossible. Later in the barracks. The room was stark. Stone walls, metal bunks, no windows. I sat on the edge of my cot. The armor was still on. We were not allowed to take it off for the first week. We had to sleep in it. We had to learn that it was not clothing. It was a second skin. I found a small polished steel plate on the wall. A mirror. I looked into it. The face was the same gray eyes, the same pale skin. But the person behind the eyes was gone. I tried to remember my mother's face. I squeezed my eyes shut and dug into my memory. It was blurry, like a picked capture left out in the acid rain. I felt a sudden spike of panic. My heart hammered against the breastplate. I was losing her. I was losing me. The emptiness opened up in my chest, vast and cold. I had given away everything. What was left, I reached up and touched the aquila stamped on my chest. The metal was cold and hard under my fingers. It didn't yield. The panic hit the armor and shattered. The emptiness remained, but it changed. It wasn't a void anymore. It was a clean room. It was a space waiting to be filled. Filled with orders. Filled with duty. Filled with him. I looked back at the stranger in the mirror. I didn't smile. We don't smile. Thank you, I whispered to the reflection. Thank you for taking her away. The girl was gone. The novice remained. And the novice had work to do. The mud on Ophelia 7 is not like other mud. It doesn't just coat you. It tries to swallow you. It is thick gray and smells of sewage and dead things. We lived in it. We slept in it. We bled in it. The training grounds were a nightmare of barbed wire and trench lines. The rain never stopped. It wasn't a cleansing rain. It was a cold, miserable drizzle that soaked through your undersuit and chilled your bones. But the cold was the least of our problems. The problem was the weight. They handed me the weapon on the third day. A Godwin Diaz pattern bolter. It is the sacred instrument of his wrath. It is also a 20-pound block of ceramite and steel. When I first held it, my arms dipped. Just a fraction. But the mistress of Repentia saw it. She didn't say a word. She just struck me across the helmet with her neural whip. The pain was blinding. "It is not heavy," she hissed. "Your faith is light." I pulled the weapon up. My muscles screamed. I locked my elbows. I became a statue of misery. The smell of that place is etched into my brain. Promethium oil. It coated everything. The gun, my gloves, my food, and cordite. The sharp, acrid taste of burnt propellant. It is the perfume of the sisterhood. We stood in the firing pits for 14 hours a day, shoulder to shoulder, statues in the rain. Target the mistress would scream. We fired. The recoil of a bolter is not like a laser gun. A laser gun snaps. A bolter kicks like a mule. It wants to break your shoulder. It wants to fly out of your hands. Every shot was a battle of wills. Me against the machine. My shoulder turned black and blue. Then it turned yellow. Then it turned a color I didn't recognize. But I didn't stop firing. To stop is to admit defeat. To admit defeat is to deny him. The girl who used to cry at scraped knees was dead. The thing in the mud didn't cry. It just reloaded. Click. Clack. Slam. The rhythm became my heartbeat. I stopped thinking about the pain. I started thinking about the target. The silhouette of a heretic painted on a wood board. I hated that board. I poured every ounce of my misery into it. I wanted it to suffer. Jam, the mistress yelled. Clear it. 3 seconds, my hands were numb from the cold. They were slick with oil and mud. I fumbled with the bolt release. My finger slipped. I tore a nail on the casing. Blood mixed with the oil. I didn't look at it. I racked the slide. I cleared the chamber. Clear, I screamed. Too slow, she said. You are dead. The heretic has killed you. Do it again. We did it again. And again. Until the sun went down. Until the sun came up. Time lost its meaning. There was only the drill. Close quarters combat was worse. They paired us against the Seraphim candidates. They were faster. They were cruel. We fought with training blades, weighted metal bars wrapped in shock padding. Didn't stop the bones from cracking. I remember being thrown into the mud, my face pressed into the filth. I tasted the earth of Ophelia 7th. It tasted like copper and rot. A boot pressed onto my neck. Get up, the Seraphim sneered. Or die there. I wanted to stay down. The mud was soft. The mud was quiet. If I stayed down, the pain would stop. But then I saw the aquila on my own chest, half buried in the muck. It was dirty. I couldn't let it be dirty. I roared. A sound that didn't belong to a human girl. I grabbed the boot. I twisted. I drove my shoulder into her knee. We tumbled into the slurry. I didn't have technique. I had desperation. I hit her with the hilt of my blade. Once. Twice. Until she stopped moving. I stood up panting. Steam rose from my armor in the cold rain. My body was a wreck. My left eye was swollen shut. But I was standing. The mistress watched me. She didn't smile, but she nodded. Adequate. That night in the barracks, we cleaned our weapons before we cleaned our wounds. That is the rule. The weapon is the soul. If the weapon is dirty, the soul is corrupt. I sat on my bunk, stripping the bolter. My hands moved automatically now. I could do it blindfolded. I often did. The other novices were groaning, nursing broken ribs and sprained wrists. I didn't groan. I hummed, a low, tuneless vibration deep in my throat. I didn't know why I was doing it. Maybe to drown out the silence. Maybe to prove I was still there. I looked at the bolter parts laid out on the rag. The firing pin, the barrel, the magazine. They were cold, dead metal. But when I put them together, they became judgment. I realized something then. The pain in my shoulder wasn't an enemy. It was a reminder. It was fuel. Every bruise was a lesson. Every scar was a verse of scripture written on my skin. I snapped the weapon back together. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Clack. I aimed it at the wall. At nothing. At everything. The mistress came by for inspection. She looked at my hands. They were raw, bleeding, shaking slightly. "The bolter is heavy, novice?" she asked. I looked her in the eye. My good eye. "No, mistress," I said. "It is the weight of his will, and his will is my strength." She didn't hit me that time. She just walked away. I lay back on the thin mattress. The ceiling was gray stone, just like the floor, just like the sky. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I rehearsed the firing drill in my mind. I imagined the heretic. I imagined his head exploding like a ripe fruit. It was a comforting thought. It lulled me to sleep better than any lullaby. They don't train us to survive. Survival is a selfish instinct. Survival is for civilians. They train us to die. The only question is, how to make your death matter. I decided mine would matter. I would make it expensive. I would make them pay for every drop of blood. I drifted off dreaming of fire and mud. The mud washed off. The bruises faded to yellow, then to white. But the dust of the scriptorium never leaves you. It settles in your lungs. It coats the inside of your throat. It tastes of dry ink and thousands of years of stagnant air. They say knowledge is power. Here, knowledge is a minefield. You step carefully. One wrong thought and you are lost. We traded the bolters for books. Heavy tomes bound in the leather of things I didn't ask about. The pages were brittle. They cracked when you turned them. The sound was like breaking finger bones. We sat in the flickering light of tallow candles, hundreds of us, reading the same lines, over and over, until the words stopped being words and became walls. Walls to keep the madness out. The confessor walked among us. He was old. His skin was as thin as the parchment. He smelled of incense and rot. He stopped at my desk. His shadow fell over the page I was studying. It was a text on the purity of the human form. "What is heresy, novice?" he asked. His voice was a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a razor. I didn't look up. I kept my eyes on the Holy Script. "Heresy is disobedience, Father," I said. "It is the refusal to serve." "No," he said. He slammed his hand down on the desk. Dust flew up in a choking cloud. "That is a crime. A crime can be punished. Heresy is not a crime. It is a disease." He leaned closer. I could hear the wheeze in his chest. "A crime is something you do," he hissed. "Heresy is something you are. It is a corruption of the blood. It is a twisting of the soul. You cannot punish a plague, Kalen. You can only burn it out. Are you willing to be the fire?" I looked at the candle flame. It danced and sputtered. It consumed the wax to stay alive. Yes, I said. My life for his purity. Good, he whispered. But words are wind. Hate. Hate requires fuel. They showed us pictures. Not clearly. Never clearly. They were silhouettes, shadows of shapes that should not exist. Limbs with too many joints. Faces that were mouths. Symbols that made your eyes water just looking at them. I felt a nausea rise in my gut. It wasn't disgust. It was a primal animal terror. My soul knew it was looking at a predator. Something that didn't want to kill me. Something that wanted to unmake me. We learned the litanies of abhorrence. We chanted them until our throats were raw. Suffer not the witch to live. Cleanse the unclean. Despise the shadow. The words became a shield. When the fear crept in, I recited the lines. The rhythm pushed the fear back. It replaced the terror with something else. Something colder. Something harder. Hatred. It is a strange thing to hate what you have never seen. But they taught us well. They taught us that the galaxy is dark. That the stars are not lights of hope. They are eyes watching us. Hungry eyes. And the only way to survive is to be brighter. To burn so hot that nothing can touch you without turning to ash. I stopped sleeping. When I closed my eyes, I saw the shapes. So I stayed awake. I prayed. I polished my hatred until it shone like a mirror. I realized that the physical training was the easy part. Broken bones knit. Muscles heal. But the mind is soft, wet clay. If you don't bake it hard in the kiln of faith, it will rot. So I let them bake me. I let the heat of the dogma dry me out. I lost my curiosity. Curiosity is the first step to damnation. I lost my doubt. Doubt is an open door. I slammed the door shut and locked it. By the end of the term, I felt different. Lighter. Or maybe just emptier. The confessor gave me a purity seal, a strip of parchment attached with red wax to my shoulder guard. It fluttered when I walked. It felt heavy. He looked at me with his watery, dead eyes. "You are ready," he said. "Not because you are strong, but because you are afraid. And you know what to do with that fear." He was right. I wasn't brave. I was just terrified of being anything other than a weapon. We were given our power armor. Real armor this time. Ceramite plates that locked over an undersuit of fiber bundles. It hummed when I put it on. A fusion reactor on my back. It felt like wearing a captured star. I put on the helmet. The world vanished, replaced by a red targeting reticule and scrolling data streams. The smell of ozone and incense was trapped in there with me. I took a breath. The air was filtered, pure, sterile. I was no longer Kaelin. I was a sister of battle. I was a vessel. We don't just learn to fight. We learn to hate, and we are excellent at it. Lyra's veil was a lie wrapped in marble. They called it a shrine world. It was supposed to be holy. The sky was a perfect artificial blue. The spires of the cathedrals pierced the clouds like golden needles. Bells rang every hour, a ceaseless chiming reminder of his grace. I hated it immediately. It was too clean. It was too soft. After the mud of Ophelia's seventh, the polish of Lyra's veil felt like an insult. We were forged in fire. Why were we standing here guarding dust? We were assigned to the processional of tears, a wide avenue paved with stones imported from Holy Terra, or so the priests claimed. Crowds of pilgrims surged back and forth like a tide of dirty water. They were desperate. They were sick. They held up twisted limbs and starving babies begging for a blessing. The smell hit me through the grill of my helmet. Unwashed bodies. Sickness. Desperation. It was the smell of humanity. I'd forgotten what it smelled like. In the convent, we smelled of oil and discipline. Here, the air was thick with weakness. I stood at the base of a statue of Saint Celestine. My bolter was mag-locked to my hip. My hands rested on the pommel of my combat knife. I didn't move. Discipline is stillness. A pilgrim reached out to touch my greave. His hand was filthy, covered in sores. I took a half step back. The servo motors in my legs whined. He recoiled as if burnt. "Bless you, sister," he wheezed. "Bless you." I looked at him through the red tint of my lenses. I didn't see a man. I saw a variable. I saw a potential vector for disease. I saw a waste of resources. "Move along," I said. My voice was amplified, metallic, and cold. He scrambled away into the throng. "It is quiet," Novice Ryland said over the Vox speed. She stood 10 meters to my left. I could hear the itch in her voice. She wanted to shoot something. We all did. We were hammers looking for nails, and all we saw were pillows. Focus Novice, Sister Superior Valerius cut in. Her voice was old leather. She had served for 30 years. She had scars older than I was. "Peace is an illusion," she said. "It is a thin sheet of ice over a deep, dark ocean. Don't look at the ice. Look for the cracks." I tried to look for cracks. I scanned the crowd. Targeting reticules flickered over faces. "Citizen, citizen, citizen." It was maddening. My finger twitched near the trigger guard. I saw a man in a heavy cloak, moving against the flow of the crowd. He looked down. He was sweating too much. "Contact," I whispered. "Sector 4. Cloaked figure. Erratic behavior." "Hold," Valerius ordered. "But I said." "Hold, Kalen." I watched the man. My heart rate spiked. This was it. The enemy. He stopped. He reached into his cloak. I tensed, ready to draw. He pulled out a prayer bead. He kissed it and fell to his knees, weeping. Just another pilgrim. Just another weakling. I felt a surge of disappointment. And then shame. I wanted him to be a heretic. I wanted a reason to purge. The sun began to set. The golden spires turned blood orange. The temperature dropped, but the crowd didn't thin. They just lit candles. Thousands of them. A sea of flickering lights in the dark. From a distance, it looked beautiful. Up close, it just looked like a fire hazard. I stood my watch. My legs didn't tire. The armor took the weight. But my mind was pacing in a cage. We are the Emperor's angels of death, not his museum guards. I looked at the pilgrims. They were praying for salvation. They were praying for us to save them. And I realized something terrible. I didn't love them. I didn't even like them. They were sheep. Bleeding, stumbling, helpless sheep. They needed us because they were too weak to hold a weapon. Their weakness was offensive. It was a stain on the perfection of the Imperium. I felt a sneer curling my lip behind the helmet. "Why do we bleed for you?" I thought. "Why do we die so you can weep and beg?" It was a dangerous thought. Pride is a sin, but it felt like truth. "The watch is ending." Rylan radioed. "Another day of nothing." "Be grateful," Valerius replied. "Boredom is a luxury. You will miss it soon enough." I didn't believe her. I wanted the fire. I wanted the test. I stared at the entrance to the lower crypts. The heavy iron doors were shut, but the air around them felt wrong. It was colder there. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, not from the cold, from instinct. A predator knows when another predator is near. Then I heard it, not with my ears. The helmet's audio sensors picked it up, a low-frequency vibration, a rhythmic thumping coming from deep underground. It wasn't the subway, it wasn't the ventilation. It sounded like a drum, or a heartbeat. "Sister Superior," I said. "Did you log any maintenance in the sub-levels?" "Negative," Valerius said. "The crypts are sealed." "I have audio contact," I said. "Movement." "Deep." The channel went silent for a second. "Form up," Valerius said. Her tone changed. The boredom was gone. The leather was replaced by steel. "Investigate. Weapons free." I unmagged my bolter. The weight of it was sudden and reassuring. Finally. The sheep vanished from my mind. The wolf was awake. We moved toward the dark doors. We went to protect them. But part of me was glad the peace was broken. Because peace is just a lie we tell ourselves before the shooting starts. The crypts didn't smell like the temple above. Above it smelled of wax and lies. Down here it smelled of wet stone and old death. The air was thick. It tasted like we were breathing underwater. We descended into the dark. The stone steps were slick with moisture. Our lumen beams cut through the blackness like spears of solid white light. Dust motes danced in the beams. They looked like ghosts. "Keep spacing tight," Sister Valerius whispered over the vox. Her voice was the only thing tethering me to reality. The walls were lined with skulls, thousands of them. Generations of the faithful cemented into the architecture. I felt them watching me, empty sockets judging the intruder. My boots crunched on something brittle. I didn't look down. I didn't want to know if it was bone. Every shadow seemed to stretch. Every drip of water sounded like a footstep. I gripped my bolter so hard my gloves creaked. My knuckles were white inside the ceramite. I was ready for a fight, or so I told myself. But my heart was beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Thump, 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 thump. It was too loud. Surely the darkness could hear it. The sound grew louder, a chanting, but it wasn't high Gothic. It was a wet, guttural language that made my teeth ache. It sounded like chewing gristle. We rounded a corner. The chamber opened up. In the center, a circle of candles. But the flame wasn't yellow. It was a sickly, bruising purple. They were there, robed figures. Too many limbs under the cloth, shadows that moved wrong. "Contact," Valerius hissed. "Heretics! Purge them!" The order broke the spell. The shadow screamed. It wasn't a human scream. It was the sound of tearing metal. They rushed us. Training is clean. The targets don't move. The targets don't scream. War is a mess. The room exploded into noise. Bolters roared. The sound in the confined space was physical. It punched me in the chest. Muzzle flashes lit up the dark like a strobe light. Click flash. A monster's face. Click flash. A spray of blood. Click flash. Darkness. I aimed at a shape. My hands were shaking. "The Emperor protects," I stammered. The words fell out of my mouth broken and small. They weren't a shield. They were just noise. A figure lunged at me. It moved too fast. I saw a knife. A jagged, rusted piece of scrap metal. It wasn't a graceful duel like with the Seraphim. It was a collision. He slammed into me. We hit the wall. The breath was knocked out of me. I smelled him. Rotten meat and unwashed skin. He was heavy. He was strong. He clawed at my helmet. I felt the metal screech. I didn't think about duty. I didn't think about honor. I thought I don't want to die in the dark. He raised the knife. I didn't think. I jammed the barrel of the bolter into his chest, and I pulled the trigger. The recoil nearly broke my wrist. Boom. He didn't fall. He was held up by my gun. Boom. He was still twitching. Boom. 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 I couldn't stop. I kept pulling until the slide locked back on an empty chamber. Click. He slid off the barrel. He hit the floor with a wet thud. There was a ruin where his chest used to be, and me. I was covered in gore. Black and red fluid sprayed across my white armor. It soaked into the joints. The shooting stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine. The air was choked with smoke and the copper tang of blood. It smelled like a slaughterhouse. Sister Valerius walked past me. Her power sword crackled, dripping with ichor. The smell of ozone burned my nostrils. She looked at the mess at my feet. "Target neutralized," she said calmly. I looked at the corpse. The first shot had killed him. The other 5 were just fear leaving my body. I tried to reload. My hands were slippery with red. I dropped the magazine. It clattered loudly on the stone. I stared at my hands. They were shaking. Violently. I had killed. I had taken a life. It didn't feel holy. It didn't feel righteous. It felt wet. And it felt easy. Too easy. I realized then that the training hadn't prepared me for the killing. It had only prepared me to pull the trigger. The rest I had to carry alone. The city was burning. Not the whole city. Just the parts that were sick. The smoke rose in thick black columns, blotting out the perfect blue sky of Lyra's Vale. It smelled of burnt wood, melted plastic, and roast meat. We call it the Emperor's incense. The curfew was absolute. The streets were empty save for the patrols. Guardians in flak armor stood at intersections, laser guns leveled at the shadows. We were the surgeons. We went door to door to cut out the cancer before it could spread. Efficiency is a kind of armor. If you move fast enough, you don't have time to think. Kick the door, flash bang, clear the room, check the eyes, check the skin. Move on. We became a rhythm, a machine made of ceramite and suspicion. In the crypts, I had been afraid. I had been shaking. Now my hands were steady. The fear had burned away, leaving only a cold, hard clarity. I didn't see people anymore. I saw potential threats. I saw vectors. A crying child was just a distraction. A begging mother was just an obstruction. To hesitate is to invite the infection in. So we didn't hesitate. We came to a tenement block in the lower districts. The air here tasted of recycled sweat and fear. Sector 7G, Sister Superior Valerius said. Auspex reads a localized gathering, unauthorized. We stacked up on the door. I was point. I didn't feel the adrenaline anymore. I just felt the weight of the bolter. It was part of my arm now. I kicked the lock. The wood splintered. We poured in. It was a family. 3 generations huddled in a single room. They were eating a meal by candlelight. They looked up at us with wide, terrified eyes. The grandfather dropped his spoon. It clattered on the floor. A small sound in the silence. On your knees, I barked. My voice amplifier turned the command into a thunderclap. They scrambled, sobbing, praying. I scanned the room. My eyes caught a small icon on the shelf. It wasn't an aquila. It was a simple 8-pointed star carved from wood. Rough. Crude, but unmistakable. Please, the mother wept. She clutched a child to her chest. We are loyal. We pay the tithe. It's just a charm. For luck. I walked over to the shelf. I picked up the icon. It felt warm. Luck is a superstition, I said. Superstition is the seed of heresy. I crushed the wood in my gauntlet. It snapped easily. We didn't know, the father pleaded. We are innocent. I looked at him. He believed it. That was the danger. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a frightened father trying to feed his family. But intentions don't matter. Only results matter. Innocence proves nothing, I said. It wasn't my voice. It was the voice of the Schola. It was the voice of the drill abbess. Get them up, Valerius ordered. Processing. Processing meant the labor camps, or the pyres, depending on how deep the rot went. I grabbed the father by his collar. He was light, frail. He struggled, but against the power armor, he was nothing. I dragged him out into the street. The smoke swirled around us, gray and choking. Other squads were dragging other people out. A chorus of weeping rose up to meet the smoke. I watched them load the family into the transport. The door slammed shut. The weeping was cut off. I stood there watching the transport drive away. I felt nothing. No guilt. No sorrow. Just a dull satisfaction. Like cleaning a stain off a floor. The floor was dirty. Now it is clean. That is all that matters. I looked at my armor. There was a smudge of soot on the white ceramite. I rubbed it away with my thumb. It left a gray streak. The flamer units moved in behind us. I heard the whoosh of the ignition, then the roar of the fire. They were burning the tenement, sanitizing the area. The heat washed over my back. It felt good. It felt pure. I turned to the next door, the next potential threat. I realized then the truth of our existence. The difference between a heretic and a loyal citizen isn't what is in their heart. It is who is holding the bolter. And today, I was holding the bolter. Next target, I said. And we moved on. The cell was a box of darkness. It was deep underground, far beneath the screams of the city. Here, the silence was heavy and wet. It smelled of rust and old blood. Not the fresh copper scent of battle. This was the sour metallic reek of slow dismantling. I was assigned to guard duty, to stand witness. The Inquisition had arrived, and they brought their tools. The prisoner was strapped to a chair of black iron. He was the cult leader we had missed in the crypts. He didn't look like a leader now. He looked like a piece of meat that had been chewed and spat out. His skin was pale translucent in the harsh light of the lumen strip. The Inquisitor stood over him. He was a small man. He wore robes of crimson velvet. His hands were delicate like a surgeon's, or a pianist's. He held a neural probe. It hummed with a sound that made my teeth itch. The truth, the Inquisitor said softly. It is a river, and pain is the dam. Let us break the dam. I stood by the door. My helmet was off. Standard protocol for witnessing. They want you to smell the heresy burning away. The Inquisitor touched the probe to the man's neck. The prisoner arched his back. He didn't scream. He had no breath left to scream. He made a sound like a leaking pipe, a high, thin whine of pure agony. My stomach turned. I clenched my jaw. This is justice, I told myself. This is necessary. But it didn't look like justice. It looked like cruelty. Where are the others? The Inquisitor asked. His voice was bored. Routine. He checked a dial on the instrument. Please, the prisoner gasped. There are no others. Lie, the Inquisitor said. He turned the dial. The prisoner convulsed. I heard a bone snap. Maybe a rib, maybe a tooth. I looked away. Just for a second. I looked at the damp wall. I counted the rivets in the steel door. 1, 2, 3. Anything to not see the man's eyes. They rolled back in his head, white and bloodshot. Look at him, sister, the Inquisitor said. He didn't turn around. He knew I had looked away. Do not avert your gaze. To look away is to show mercy. And mercy is a sin, I finished automatically. I forced my eyes back to the chair. The prisoner was weeping now. Bloody tears ran down his ruined face. You are monsters, he whispered. You are worse than the gods. The Inquisitor smiled. It was a cold, thin smile. We have to be, he said, to keep them at bay. The session lasted for hours, or maybe days. Time doesn't exist in a torture cell. Eventually, the prisoner stopped moving. He stopped making sounds. His heart gave out. He hadn't given up a single name. Maybe because he was strong, or maybe because there were no names to give. The Inquisitor wiped his instrument with a white cloth. Unfortunate, he said. He died before he could be saved. He looked at the corpse with mild annoyance, like a pen that had run out of ink. I looked at the dead man. He was just a husk now, a broken toy. I felt a crack in my armor, not the ceramite, the armor inside. I had killed people in the street. That was war. This was something else. This was harvesting pain. I felt dirty, a grime that wouldn't wash off. Did we get what we needed? I asked. My voice was hollow. The Inquisitor looked at me. He seemed surprised by the question. We got his suffering, he said. That is enough. Suffering purifies the soul, even a heretic's soul. I walked out of the cell. My boots echoed in the corridor. I went to the chapel. It was empty. I knelt before the statue of the Emperor. I tried to pray. I tried to summon the hatred, the alien, the mutant, the heretic. But the words felt dry. Empty husks, like the man in the chair. I realized then that the goal wasn't information. The goal wasn't truth. The goal was punishment. We punish them for existing. We punish them for being weak. And in doing so, we become something that cannot be punished. Because we are the ones holding the whip. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the Emperor's light. I just saw the darkness of that cell. And I realized it was the same darkness that was inside me. Lyra's veil was just the beginning, a skirmish, a warm-up. The real war was waiting for us on Armageddon. The name is not a metaphor. It is a promise. The sky there is not blue. It is a bruised purple choked with the exhaust of 1,000,000 war machines. The ground is not soil. It is ash and mud and crushed bone. We deployed into the ash wastes. The scale of it broke the mind. Trenches that stretched from horizon to horizon. Artillery that shook the planet's crust. It wasn't a battle. It was a meat grinder. And we were the meat. I was no longer a novice. I was a battle sister. I had earned my power armor. I had earned the bolter. But on Armageddon, rank didn't matter. Only luck mattered. The enemy was the orcs. Green tides of muscle and rage. They didn't care about tactics. They didn't care about fear. They just came, wave after wave, screaming their barbaric war cries. We stood on the firing step. The mud sucked at our greaves. Here they come, the lookout screamed. The horizon turned green. The noise was absolute, a wall of sound, gunfire, roaring, explosions. You couldn't think, you could only react. Fire at will, Sister Superior Valerius yelled. We opened up, a line of bolter fire, explosive and bright. We tore into them, bodies exploded, limbs flew, but they kept coming, climbing over the dead, using the corpses of their kin as stepping stones. It was madness. It was beautiful in a sick way, a pure expression of violence. I fired until my bolter barrel glowed red hot. I swapped magazines. I fired again. I didn't aim for heads anymore. I just aimed for the mass. You couldn't miss. I saw a sister 2 spots down go down, ideally a hero's death. In reality, an orc choppa took her head off before she could scream. Her body slumped back into the trench, fountain of blood. I didn't stop firing. I didn't look at her nameplate. She was gone. I was still here. That was the only math that counted. Breach Sector 4. The Vox crackled. They were in the trench. It became a brawl. I drew my combat knife. It felt small against the monsters. An orc vaulted the parapet. He was huge, a mountain of muscle and bad teeth. He roared in my face. Spittle hit my visor. I didn't feel fear. I was too tired for fear. I was exhausted. My soul was tired. I stepped inside his swing. I drove the knife into his throat. It was like stabbing a tree trunk. He didn't die. He backhanded me. The impact threw me 10 feet. I hit the trench wall. My armor warning screamed. Structural integrity compromised. Medical injects administered. I gasped for air. Pain flooded my system. Stims flooded it back. I scrambled up. He was coming for me, raising a jagged axe. Then his head vanished. A bolt round from Valerius. She stood over me. Her armor was scarred black with soot. "Get up, Kalen," she roared. "We are not done dying yet." I got up. I picked up my bolter. I started shooting again. The war didn't care about my pain. The war didn't care about my exhaustion. The war just wanted more ammo. Days turned into weeks. We lived in that trench. We ate nutrient paste that tasted like chalk. We slept standing up. We prayed while we cleaned our guns. We became part of the landscape, gray, hard, dead. I looked at the faces of my sisters. They were hollow. The zeal was gone, replaced by a grim mechanical determination. We weren't fighting for the Emperor anymore. We weren't fighting for glory. We were fighting because it was the only thing left to do. If we stopped, we died. So we didn't stop. How long, a young sister asked one night. The shelling had paused for a moment. How long until we win, I looked at her. She was fresh. Reinforcement. She still had shine on her armor. We don't win, I said. My voice was flat. Deadpan. We just hold the line. For how long, she asked. Forever, I said. Or until we run out of blood. She looked horrified. I turned back to the darkness of no man's land. I checked my magazine. Full. Good. The war would continue. It always did. And I was ready to feed it. We were dying. It wasn't a guess anymore. It was a calculation. We'd been pushed back to the ruins of a cathedral. The roof was gone, blown open to the bruised sky. The orcs were swarming the walls. My bolter clicked empty. I reached for a fresh magazine. I grabbed only air. I was dry. We were all dry. Sister Superior Valerius drew her power sword. The blade flickered. Even the batteries were dying. Fix bayonets, she screamed. Die standing, die with his name on your lips. I pulled my combat knife. It was chipped and dull. I looked at the green tide pouring over the rubble. I wasn't afraid. I was just disappointed. I thought my death would be bigger. I thought it would mean more than just being trampled in the mud. Then the light came. It didn't come from the sun. It came from the air itself. A golden brilliance that blinded the eyes and seared the soul. The noise of the battle stopped. Even the orcs froze. They shielded their eyes, howling in confusion. A figure descended from the clouds. Wings of fire, armor of polished gold. A living saint. I don't know which one. Does it matter? She was a manifestation of his will. She held a sword that burned like a star. She swept over the enemy lines. Where she passed, the orcs turned to ash. They didn't just die. They were unmade. The sisters around me fell to their knees. They were weeping. A miracle, someone sobbed. He sees us. He is with us. Valerius was crying. Tears streamed down her scarred face, washing away the grime. Glory, she screamed. Glory to the golden throne. I stood there. I didn't kneel. I watched the saint slaughter the enemy. It was efficient. It was powerful. But I felt cold. I waited for the rapture. I waited for the warmth of faith to fill me up. I waited to feel the love of the Emperor. But I felt nothing. My heart remained a stone in my chest. I looked at the saint. I saw a weapon. A very expensive, very powerful weapon. I looked at my sisters. They saw a mother. They saw salvation. Why couldn't I see it? Had I cut away too much? Had I hollowed myself out so completely that there was nothing left to hold the light? The saint hovered above us. She looked down. Her face was a mask of perfection. Beautiful, terrible, and utterly inhuman. I realized then that she was no different from the orcs. She was just a force of nature, a storm wrapped in gold. Why don't I feel it? I whispered to myself. The noise of the prayers drowned me out. They were happy. They were saved. I was just alone. In the middle of a miracle, I was completely alone. Miracles are not free. That is the lesson they don't teach you in the stories. The saint cleared the courtyard, but the main orc force was regrouping at the bridge. If they crossed, they would flank the saint's advance. Someone had to hold the bridge. Someone had to buy time. The saint didn't say a word. She just pointed her burning sword at the bridge. It was an order. Valerius nodded. She wiped the tears from her eyes. The rapture was gone. The soldier was back. Squad Kalen, she said. With me. We hold the bridge. She didn't say until relieved. She didn't say until we win. She just said, "We hold." We ran to the bridge. It was a narrow strip of rockcrete over a chasm of industrial waste. We took positions behind the barricades. We scavenged ammo from the dead. I found 2 magazines, 60 rounds. That was my life expectancy. The orcs came. They were angry now. They knew they were losing. They wanted to take something with them. They wanted to take us. For the St. Valerius shouted. She charged them. She was a whirlwind of silver and blood. I covered her. I fired single shots, conservative, lethal, 1 shot, 1 kill. I watched Valerius die. An orc knob caught her with a power claw. It punched through her chest plate like it was paper. She didn't scream. She just spat blood in his face and detonated her melt-a-bomb. They both vanished in a sphere of white heat. I didn't mourn. I didn't pause. I shifted my aim to the next target. The sister to my right took a round to the throat. Gurgle. Drop. The sister to my left was dragged over the barricade. Scream. Silence. And then there was me. I was the last one. I stood on a pile of casings that reached my ankles. The orcs were hesitant. They looked at the burning wreckage of their leader. They looked at the golden light advancing behind me. They looked at me. I raised my bolter. I pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. I dropped the magazine. I reached for the second one. It was already in the gun. That was it. I was dry. I didn't run. I didn't draw my knife. I just stood there. I looked at the horde. "Come on," I said. My voice was just a whisper in the wind. "Finish it." But they didn't come. The golden light swept over the bridge. The saint had arrived. She incinerated the orcs on the far bank. The battle was over. We had won. The bridge was secure. I looked around. Bodies. Just bodies. Valerius. Rylan. All of them. Meat for the machine. A guardsman officer ran up to me. He looked at the carnage. He looked at me, standing alone, covered in soot and gore. Thrown, he gasped. You held them. You're alive." He sounded horrified, as if my survival was unnatural. Maybe it was. I looked at him. My eyes felt dry. "I am out of ammunition," I said. "Resupply is required." He stared at me. "Is that all?" he asked. "Your squad is dead, sister." "They did their duty," I said. I walked past him. I needed to find more bolts. The war wasn't over. Only the battle was. And I was still efficient. Years go by. Or maybe decades. Time is hard to track when every day is the same. Wake, pray, train, kill, clean, sleep. I am no longer Kalen the novice. I am Canonus Kalen. I wear the heavy cloak. I carry the rod of office. The ozone smell follows me now. I am the storm. I stand in the hall of judgment. The same hall where I knelt as a child. The stone is still cold. The shadows are still long. A new batch of wards is kneeling before me. They are small, terrified, trembling. I walk down the line. My boots click on the granite. Click, click, click. The sound of authority. I stop in front of a girl. She's shaking. She's trying so hard to be brave. She reminds me of someone. A ghost I barely remember. Name, I say. My voice is granite, rubbing against granite. "Ward. Ward Alara," she stammers. I am..." She chokes. Fear closes her throat. She looks up at me. Her eyes are pleading. She wants mercy. She wants me to tell her it will be all right. I look at her. I feel a twinge in my chest. A memory of pain. A memory of a rod striking my shoulder. I could be kind. I could tell her to breathe. I could show her a moment of warmth. But warmth is a lie. Warmth will get her killed. If I am kind now, she will be weak later. If she is weak, she will die in the dark. And she will die uselessly. I cannot let that happen. I have to break her. To save her. "Weakness," I whisper. I raise the rod. I see the terror in her eyes. It is necessary. It is love. The Emperor's terrible love. Pain is a lesson, I say. Learn it. I strike. The crack of the energy discharge echoes in the hall. She screams. I do not flinch. I watch her fall. I wait for her to rise. She will hate me. Good. Hate is a fuel. She will need it. I walk to the next girl, and the next. The cycle turns. The gears grind. We are not people. We are the walls of the Imperium. And walls do not feel. Walls do not cry. Walls just stand until they crumble. And I am still standing.